Our products can hold one Pat and one Paul. Next thing we'll go over, we kind of touch base on the transmission, is the carburetor. This is the stock carburetor on this bike. You're gonna take these 8mm off. You will need to learn how to do this. It is not terribly difficult. In here, you've got your pilot jet. From your pilot jet or your slow jet into your main jet. Is that needle is gonna come in and out, in and out. Is you're gonna pull this little pin out here. But yeah, they're good motors. Honda reliability, take care of them. Make sure you change the oil. So Paul was saying douche yesterday, and I realized I don't think he knows what a douche is. So tell me what a douche is.
What is a douche, Paul?
We are going to talk about the Navi motor, just do a quick kind of rundown on the components, kind of how to access things and what you'll likely be working on. The transmission is going to affect how it takes off, how it accelerates. So first off, what we have going on here is this is your variator up front. I'm gonna pull this off and show you guys where it should be, because if it gets thin to a certain amount, what's gonna happen is you're gonna lose top speed. So over time, if you feel like your Navi is getting slower and slower and slower. Hello.
Hi, this is Paul Roger with Medicare Health Services. How are you today?
Did you say your name is Paul Wall, People's Champ?
This is Paul Roger, sir.
Paul Wall?
Health Services, Paul Roger.
Yeah, Paul Wall, the People's Champ. Wait, let's say your bike is sitting at 3,000 RPM and it's shifting, okay? You're not making a lot of power at 3,000. So this is where your tuning comes in. You know, I would advise if you're going to be modifying this bike, just get the clutch right off the bat. It has a lot more mass and it doesn't breathe like this one, so it's gonna... If you don't put the belt down in the back, like this, now your drive face is loose. This is steel. You end up ruining your crank. Hey Paul, you ate your turkey burgers and then you put the box back in the freezer. Yeah, you did. For what? No. Wow. That's like next level. That's next level lazy right there. It's gonna... You
broke it.
Hey, no, you're gonna throw it on the ground and it's gonna bounce and hit you right in the face. That's gonna happen.
Durable. Okay, I'm gonna do like a medium.
Ooh. Okay. And that's the fastest setting I can make it in.
Right on the corner.
Yeah, but...
I have an idea. Can we do a wheelie and throw it off?
Sit on it, Paul.
No, have Pat sit on it. Pat's heavier.
Pat, sit on it. Sit on it.
Sit on it?
Yeah. See if it can withstand one... Oh yeah, see if it can stand one pat.
I weigh 228 pounds currently.
Before he eats. All right, now pick up Paul and
Paul, hop on my back.
hop on his back.
Oh my god, this is...
Get on my back.
We want to test our products here.
Wait, hold on.
Oh boy.
Wait, hop on my back.
It's out.
Get off.
Our products can hold one Pat and one Paul. Oh, that's pretty impressive.
Damn. Aggressive.
Oh! What? Did it break?
No.
Wow.
It's falling apart.
But still, that's pretty impressive. Oh no. Well, I think that broke it.
That's pretty broken.
This is like, look at the infill. It's like no infill. It's hollow pretty much. Look at it.
Still pretty strong.
No, not anymore. Hey! Hey! Wait! Wait! Next thing we'll go over, we kind of touch base on the transmission, is the carburetor. This is the stock carburetor on this bike. What's going on here? This is your throttle cable. Okay, you give it throttle, the slide's gonna come up inside, giving you more air and more fuel. Over here, that is your idle speed adjustment. That's gonna change the speed at what your bike idles at. This right here is your air idle screw adjustment. However, they filled it in. Honda does that so you can't adjust it, likely for emissions, I would assume. So you're probably not gonna fiddle with that. This is your fuel coming into the bike, coming from your gas tank. And this is your choke, for your choke cable. The very, very basic, very standard carb, nothing special. The downside with these carburetors, for one, they're very hard It's hard to get to these bolts. It's not fun. We actually had to trim a little bit of the fairings back to access these with it in the bike, so be prepared. If you want to fiddle with this carb, you need to trim these out. Any carb, actually, you're going to need to trim it out if you put it on this bike.
Or the clip, you just go ahead and remove it right here.
Your jets, I'll show you guys. If you want to access your jets for this bike, you're going to take these 8mm off, which you actually have to use a wrench to do these, or a little shorty ratchet. You're going to pull those two screws, that one there and that one there, off the bottom of the carburetor. I'll show you guys how that works in just a second. That's where you're going to access your main jet and your pilot jet on this carburetor. That screw is to drain the bowl. So if you need to drain the fuel out for whatever reason, that's the screw you're going to use to access the or to get the old fuel out of the carburetor. All right, so you've got the carb off the bike. First thing you're going to do is take your Phillips, take these two puppies off here, and this is going to come in handy if you need to clean your carb at some point. If you own this bike and you're not having it worked on by a shop, you will need to learn how to do this. It is not terribly difficult, but you will need to learn how to do this at some point in your ownership. Also, if you're planning on jetting your stock carburetor to get a little more power and you're not going to run a performance carb kit, you need to know how to do this as well. So you're going to set your bowl aside there. You have a O-ring in the bowl. Make sure you don't pinch that, slice it, whatnot, because I'm guessing at this point Honda's probably going to take weeks to get one. In here, you've got your pilot jet. Your pilot jet is going to control basically off idle and a little bit in your idle circuit to about 5/8 throttle. And your main jet is going to take over from there. These two kind of intersect in the middle. So as you're rolling on the throttle, as the slide comes up and the needle comes out, it's gonna transition from your pilot jet or your slow jet into your main jet. So wide open throttle is going to be all main jet, and then as you roll back down to idle, it's going to transition over to your pilot. So cruising is mostly going to be your pilot. Cruising speeds and your wide open throttle is going to be your main jet. So to take these out, very simple. You've just got a flat blade here. And once you've got your bowl off, you're going to see a few things in here, okay? This is going to be your float. This plastic looking donut thing is your float, okay? This controls a little valve in here that allows fuel in and out of your carburetor to fill up this area. Once fuel is inside your bowl right here, what happens is when you're idling, cruising around, it's going to draw from this pilot jet here, or your slow jet. That's going to be basically off idle and a little bit of idle up until about 5/8 throttle. And then at that point, as you open the slide more, give it more throttle, it's going to transition over to your main jet. Your main jet is what's going to be most of your top wide open, top speed, you're holding it on the freeway type of thing. That's going to be your wide open. And from a dead stop, you give it wide open throttle. That's going to be your main jet. So these can be changed. We do sell these kits as well. If you plan on keeping the stock carburetor, there are some pretty good gains to be had with just changing your jetting and doing a pod filter on this guy. If you want to clean your carburetor, you just kind of want to know how your carburetor works, is you're going to pull this little pin out here. You're going to pull the float out, and you'll see this little tiny needle with like a little rubber end on it. That's going to go up and down, shutting off the amount of fuel coming into your bowl. So it can be a little bit tricky to get in here. Just slide that guy in like that. You're going to drop the needle right down into that area. Like I said, a little bit tricky. And you're going to take this pin, you're going to put it back in. The only time you're going to have to mess with this float is when you're cleaning your carburetor, cleaning it out. You're going to mess with this piece. So keep in mind when you're moving the carburetor around and you're messing with the jet, you're cleaning it, this pin can fall out really easily. Also, if your pin is sticking out to one side, you go to put your float on, you can bend this pin. So make sure it's in properly like that. That's kind of the main components of the carburetor. This is called your Emulsion Tube. This atomizes the air and fuel as it goes into your carburetor. Not really going to mess with that. However, if you want to change these pilot and slow, pilot/slow, or the main out, you're going to use a small flat blade. Those come right out and they go right back in. Very simple. Let's put this puppy back on here. Again, just take your time. You don't want that O-ring to come out. You don't want to bend that pin for your float because you'll always have issues then, and then you're just going to have to order it from Honda, and again, that's just not going to be fun for anybody. The back side here, you have an O-ring. It's very crucial that this O-ring is put in place here. It can fall out, so you want to push it back in. This O-ring creates a seal between your carburetor and your intake manifold here, so make sure that O-ring is in place. If you lose this, you're going to need to order a new one and make sure it's the right size. The choke, you're not really going to mess with the choke at all. It's not really an item you're going to have to get to or clean, whatnot. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull off this cap, which has your slide and your needle in here. Okay, so just give you guys a rough breakdown here. Again, if you're just servicing this bike, cleaning, this is all you have to do. You don't have to mess with this any more than that. Just that's the way it is. This is your needle. It has this taper. This is the needle that's going to come up and down out of your main jet. Okay, your main jet has a hole in the middle of it. I'll kind of show you guys how that works, just so you have a rough idea of kind of how these things function. That way, when you're working on it, you can kind of go in with some information. Okay, so there's your needle. That's going to be your main jet. Okay, this is not the right main jet, of course, but it's going to sit, just for reference. That main jet's going to go down inside the carburetor, and essentially you're going to have an emulsion tube, but what's going to happen is that needle is going to come in and out, and that's going to allow more fuel to come out of the jet into the carburetor. Now, of course, not the right main jet, and you have an emulsion tube here, but just to give you a rough idea of kind of how it works, that needle is going to go up and down. It has a taper to it, and the more that needle comes out, which is you twisting the throttle, you're going to let more air is going to come into the carburetor because the slide is going up, and more fuel is going to come in because you're going to pull that needle. You're going to pull that out of the main jet and emulsion tube, essentially giving it more fuel. That's your carb, guys. Very simple. I'm going to put the carb back together and show you the orientation of how the slide goes in, and that should pretty much wrap up the bike. I'll go over kind of a couple more small things, but that's kind of the bulk of the amount of items I suspect people are going to be accessing and may need some knowledge on. So when you go to put your carburetor in, you're going to look at this slide. You're going to have one groove that goes all the way down. You're going to have one groove that goes up just a little bit. What you need to keep in mind is this is your idle speed. That needs to be on this side. The way this works is when you screw this in, your screw pushes right on that little taper and it pushes the slide up to raise the idle speed. If you put it in this way, what happens is there's a pin down in here that's pressed in, that's a guide. So if you shove it down the other way, you're going to break this slide. So always make sure it goes in like this, and it'll stop, and you just kind of roll it. Okay, so look at, see how easy that goes in? It goes all the way down. If you have it in 180 degrees out, it stops right there. So you would really have to force this thing down, and you would break it to get it in wrong. It will not go in any other way. As I rotate it around, it slides right down. Very simple. Easy stuff here. Once you get that down, you're gonna thread this cap on. The nature of this carburetor makes it where you have to change a throttle cable if you go with a different style carburetor, because this throttle cable has this thread-on cap, which is kind of proprietary to this carb. Now you guys know how the carburetor works. Very basic stuff. You guys are probably somewhat aware with how they work in general. You know how the transmission works, you know how the starter works, you know where your gear oil is. Come around the other side, your exhaust, you're not really gonna have to fiddle with. However, if you need to change your gasket, if you have a leak, you've got a gasket up here, which is two 10mm nuts. That comes down, and there's a little gasket in there. Spark plug. Just gonna pull this cap off, take a socket, pull that plug out. Not gonna be something you're gonna have to change very often, but that's where it's at. This is your spark plug cap. It will happen over time. These get brittle and they crack, so make sure this is pushed on all the way. You see it kind of just, make sure it's tight and snug. Obviously, well, that should be how that sits, but make sure it's pushed in tight and grips onto the plug. It should be nice and solid. If it's loose, you're gonna have issues with spark. Under this side, this is your fan. This is where your cooling is. Do not take these shrouds off and run it. The shrouds have to stay on because air comes in here with this fan spinning off the motor, comes around the top part and around the fins to the other side. So this is how your engine gets cooled. It's an air-cooled motor, not oil-cooled. Air comes in here, over the side, over the cylinder head to the other side of the motor. If you remove these shrouds for whatever reason, you're gonna overheat and you're gonna blow up your motor. It's just a matter of time. This is where your oil is here. I'm sure there's videos on oil changes as well. It's a really simple motor. Your cam's up here, your valve adjustment's gonna be up here. But yeah, other than that, very simple, very straightforward. This is your brake arm. If you pull your wheel off, you're gonna find brake pads in here. Very easy to change as well. You're gonna have to take your exhaust pipe off. You're gonna have to take this bolt off here. The wheel comes off and you can access those pads. There are no tools required to take the pads off once you get your wheel and exhaust off. That kind of encompasses this whole motor. You're not really gonna be messing with a whole lot other than your transmission, possibly a camshaft. We will make a video on that as well, and your carburetor. Those are the bulk amount of the things you guys are gonna be dealing with. But yeah, they're good motors. Honda reliability, take care of them. Make sure you change the oil, your belt, valve adjustments, and they'll run for a really long time. So thanks for watching. Next video we're gonna throw together is the performance parts, what they do and how they go together.